Good morning from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. This is the English language section of Free Radio Europe. Welcome to the show, and my guest today is Bernard Guetta, a member of the European Parliament from Renew and a self-declared Macronite.
Absolutely.
Supporter of President Macron, who presented the priorities of the French presidency here in the debating chamber yesterday. But I wanted to start with something that we have in common. We have both tried to occupy our secondary schools. You in
I did not know for you.
1968 and me in 1981. I think from slightly different motives. Well, the motives were political.
Maybe not. We could discuss that.
Sure. You are now a first-term member of parliament like me, but before, like me, you were a journalist for Le Monde, for Nouvel Observateur and others. And in that capacity, you served in Washington, in Moscow. But what I really want to know is what you remember from your service in Poland in the 1980s, including from the Lenin shipyard during the historic strike.
You know, your country was at that time a deeply united country, deeply united against communism. Very simple.
Well, because Solidarity was liked by the right because it was anti-communist, and by the left because it was a trade union.
You know, even the left was anti-communist. And basically, 50% of my friends in Solidarity, in the Polish opposition at that time, were leftist. I mean, not communist, but leftist. And so I was, by the way.
And Solidarity had some very social demands.
Absolutely. That's normal for the trade union. But basically, you know, Solidarity united the entire country from the left, if not the extreme left, but anti-communist, till the extreme right. From Jacek Kuron to Kaczynski's. And so it was a very moving situation for me, and specifically during the strike at the shipyard, because there was such hopes in the faces, you know, in the discussions, in the speeches.
There was fear too.
Not really. You know, not really. I don't remember that. People, strangely enough, were very confident in their victory, and much more than I was. I remember I asked a young worker, not in Gdansk, but in Sopot, I think. Yes, in Sopot. And I asked him, aren't you afraid of the situation? No, don't worry. He told me, don't worry. He told me, don't worry. And why so? Because there was a feeling among those workers, because basically at the beginning it was workers, and it was there was this feeling that it was the beginning of the end for the regime, for the communist regime. And strangely enough, also, they were not afraid at all of a Soviet intervention in their country at that time.
But the Soviet intervention was considered, as you know.
Of course, but they were not afraid of that. And no, really, there was a lot of confidence. And, you know, I remember the night in the Gdansk shipyard, when the strikers made the list of their, what is it in Polish, revendications?
Demands.
Postulati. And the first move, you know, at the beginning of the discussion was first postulate, the end of the regime. And it was very radical, but very quietly
radical. It was a self-limiting revolution. It was the Warsaw intellectuals who joined, who I think had a constructive influence on the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because after 30 minutes of discussion, the members of the corps took the floor and told the workers, the strikers, no, 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 no. It would be Budapest 56. So forget it. Let's forget it. And just ask postulati demands that the regime couldn't refuse. And specifically, the freedom of the trade union, a free trade union, because the regime signed the International Convention about freedom of trade unions.
But
So it was supposedly legal to ask for a new trade union.
Sure. You then attended the first Congress of the Solidarity.
Absolutely, I was there. Yes.
So you were there
and
during the
the
declaration of the solidarity with workers of Central Europe.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, during the Congress, it was already the beginning of the real fight between the power and solidarity. Everybody understood, including me, of course, everybody understood that it was the last months of the so-called Porozumienie. And so a lot of delegates...
And Warsaw Pact exercises were taking place.
Exactly. And so a lot of delegates decided to forget being careful. And so they spoke their mind. And their mind was let's forget communism and let's start democracy in our country.
My favorite quote from that time, and I have it from two sources, the author and the chairman of the Congress, who was Jerzy Buzek. When these heated discussions were taking place and the votes were not coming through, Wałęsa said, we were supposed to have democracy, and here everybody votes the way they want. But in those days, as a Frenchman, could you have imagined that one day Britain will not be in the European Union and Poland will be?
Let me think.
Because I couldn't.
Let me think. No, England certainly not. But Poland, I was absolutely confident that it was the beginning of communism in Europe.
Solidarity delegitimized communism as an ideology. Every regime has some kind of ideological claim. Mm-hmm. And the claim of communism was, we represent the working class.
Exactly.
And Solidarity showed persuasively for all to see, no, you don't.
But it was not only that point. That point is absolutely essential. But some other thing. In the Western countries, at that time, communism was already completely delegitimized. You say delegitimized?
Discredited.
Discredited, exactly. Discredited. Because of what? Because of Budapest 56, because of Warsaw 56, because of Poland 72 or 71 on the Baltic coast.
70.
70? Mm-hmm. 70, okay, I'm sorry. Because of Radom and Ursus and because Solidarity and the strike.
And Prague 68, of course.
And Prague, and Afghanistan, and the dissident in Soviet Union and the dissident in almost all the so-called popular democracies at that time. And so the communism as an ideology and as an international movement was almost destroyed. There
was a fairly strong French Communist Party and an Italian Communist Party.
It was the Communist Party in Italy was already a social democratic party, And in France, it was completely mad. It was pure madness, completely divided, completely disoriented, and specifically disoriented by Prague 68. By Prague 68. It was very important because, including in the French Communist Party, there was a hope for the so-called communisme à visage humain, communism with a human face. And so even the intellectuals, certainly the intellectuals in the French Communist Party, but also the grassroots were completely disoriented by that.
Sure. We now have more political prisoners in Russia today than under Brezhnev.
Absolutely.
And we again have Russian troops threatening to invade a country that dares to be democratic and free.
This is a fair description.
I want to come back to this, but let's refer to your president's speech here yesterday. He was fairly strong on the need to put our European house in order as regards democratic standards and rule of law. I took it as a message to the governments of Hungary and Poland. You need to come back onto the path of abiding by the treaties that we agreed.
You were absolutely right.
Accession treaties, the Lisbon Treaty, and we, the taxpayers of Western Europe, don't want to finance the building of dictatorships.
Absolutely.
Did I get it right?
Absolutely, completely.
So PiS in Poland is not going to have an easy time after with their so-called judicial reforms, which try to put judges under party control.
Not at all. Not
with
at
this
all.
presidency.
And by the way, not only because of France, but because of 25 member states.
Sure.
Except
the Dutch
Poland.
the Dutch are very strong on this.
Exactly.
I hope the Polish government listens. I mean, he even demanded, the procedures to be speeded up on Article 7 and so on.
You know, I hope also that your government, Mr. Kaczynski, were listening. But will they listen? Will they hear? I'm not sure. And they are in a deadlock now, in a political deadlock. And they don't want to understand the situation, and they don't want, I'm afraid so, to understand even the balance of power inside the European Union and inside Europe. Because Mr. Kaczynski shouldn't forget that there is a real danger at your border, I mean at the Polish border. And
it's not a good time to be isolated. Huh?
Certainly not.
And not to be in good standing as a European democracy.
And let's not forget that Poland now is isolated by Mr. Kaczynski from the United States and from the rest of the European Union. So who are now your allies? Mr. Orban? Mr. Orban and Mr. Orban. That's it.
Who signed secret deals with Putin.
Exactly. And is he a reliable ally for Poland, Mr. Orban?
Or even for PiS as a party. Let's remember that when Kaczynski tried to replace Donald Tusk for his second term, the Hungarians voted for Tusk. He was also talking about some kind of new security structure for Europe and a European deal with Russia that would somehow create a context in which the Russians might not invade. This I was more dubious about, I have to say. Because first of all, the reason the European Union is not at the table with the United States and Russia as regards Ukraine is a result of mistakes made by Germany and France.
Which mistake?
It was Germany and France that created first the Normandy process, which is to say member states negotiating with Russia and Ukraine over, and then the Minsk process, the same thing, thereby excluding the High Representative and not including the only country in Europe, Poland, which is a neighbor of both Russia and Ukraine. So we now have this, we have put ourselves in a situation where a European issue is discussed by the Americans and the Russians. That's number one. And number two, as you know, because you lived it, we already have an architecture, security architecture of Europe that includes Russia. It's called OSCE. And OSCE was a deal between the East and the West that there would be some protection for dissidents. In return, the West will recognize existing borders in Europe, however they were arrived at historically, right? So how can we create a new order with Russia when she is not respecting the existing order which she guaranteed, both as a member of the OSCE and as a signatory of the Budapest Memorandum of 94, in which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in return for guarantees of independence and borders. You are President Macron now. Answer for him.
Okay. I understand your point of view, but I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you on the first point because, in any case, the dream of Mr. Putin is to reinstore the international order of the Cold War. So, two big powers, and not only two big powers, the Soviet Union or now Russia.
Russia
and
is
the
the leader
United
of a
States.
multinational.
Yes, but let's
body.
forget. Yes, you're right. Let's forget it. But basically, two big powers, and that's it.
Doing a Yalta too.
And that's it. And certainly not a third power in Europe, which would be the European Union. So if Mr. Putin didn't invite us, you and I, at the table, it's because basically, essentially, because he doesn't want us, the European Union, to exist as a political union. This is the first point. The second point, yes, of course, there is an order for the continent defined by the Helsinki Agreement and then the OSCE. But unfortunately, Mr. Putin doesn't respect this, the rules of the Helsinki Agreements. So we have the choice now to make war with Russia, economical war.
No. Nobody wants
No.
war with Russia.
Let
But
me
we
speak.
can help the victim of Russian aggression.
Let me tell you, we have a choice. Let's say un bras de fer. What is it in English? Do you understand a bras de fer? A political fight. A political fight. A political-
Diplomacy has to be backed up by force. Otherwise, it's just talk.
Okay. Or to try to find a new political agreement on the stability and cooperation in Europe. I would say that we should try the second point, but at the same time, we should do two things. First, to define the economical sanction we would impose to Mr. Putin if he had the very bad idea to annex part of the entire Ukraine.
All of it.
All of it. And first to define those sanctions, then to let Mr. Putin know what would be concretely and very precisely our sanction in the first hour of any annexation or
All right.
invasion
What do you think they
and so on
should be?
and so on.
I'll tell you what they should be.
Just a minute. So we have we have to have two tools:
Yes.
an offer to a political discussion
course.
and a toughness.
Of course.
You agree with me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
You
we agree.
You need to have deterrence and diplomacy at the same time. Let's remember how the Cold War was won by the Ostpolitik of talking to communist regimes and by the toughness of Ronald Reagan in standing up to them. And the two
I
together
would agree
were-
with you. Yes.
Good. So now we need to define the consequences, but give Mr. Putin what the Americans called an off-ramp, which is an opportunity to not invade.
So there is no disagreement between us.
But let's think about what would deter President Putin. I say
okay.
Ukraine needs anti-ship, anti-aircraft, and anti-tank weapons. We need to go and announce it in advance that we would really go after the money of President Putin himself and his oligarchs. And that would mean targeting the tax havens, the money laundering in our own banking system. We need to cut off Russia from the SWIFT system. And I think one of the most effective ways to get better terms of trade with Russia would be to create a gas union. Or the Commission buying gas on behalf of all the member states and negotiating with Russia the price.
But
There is
why-
a precedent. There is a precedent. That's the way we buy uranium for your French nuclear power plants.
But Radek, why do you think that Mr. Macron would disagree with that?
I'm not thinking. No.
No.
But it
I don't think he
requires-
would.
it
I don't think
requires-
he would. I don't think he would. In any case, I wouldn't. In any case, I wouldn't. I agree with you on that. But I do think also that we have to make an offer to the Russian people and that we should, as the European Union, maybe the Council, maybe the Parliament, maybe the Commission, I don't know, and I don't care, we should address directly the Russian people, not Mr. Putin, the Russian people, to tell them that we want cooperation with Russia, that we would like, that we would want cooperation with Russia and stability on the continent and respect of borders and so on and so on, and that our best hope is this kind of agreement with Russia.
We should try, but let's not get our hopes too high. I saw a Levada Center poll about the prospect of war in Ukraine. The majority of Russian people have been so brainwashed that they think the war would be the fault of the United States.
40%, I think.
Really?
Yes.
A shockingly high number.
No, I would say only 40%. Only 40%.
I can't remember the figure, but
And because in such a country, with such a propaganda apparatus and so on, 30%, it's not that high. Just the opposite. Actually, just the opposite. And I'm confident that the Russian people now is more and more, fed up with Mr. Putin. And I think that politically speaking and economically speaking also, Mr. Putin is not stronger and stronger, but weaker and weaker. And precisely because...
what does weaker mean?
Let
He
me
has
finish.
total power
Let
in
me
his hand.
finish. And precisely because he's weaker and weaker, he's more and more dangerous and unpredictable.
I define it different. I agree that he's more dangerous and unpredictable, but for a different reason. I think he has concentrated, in a traditional Russian way, all the power in the state in
Yes,
his own hands. We
yes.
agree. But you know, the British have a saying, after 8 years, every prime minister goes mad. And as we know, some of them go mad even earlier.
Yeah.
But President Putin has been in power, unchecked power, for 22 years.
Yes.
So he believes his own propaganda. He published,
And so he's weaker and weaker.
he is more prone to make mistakes. That's not weakness.
No. We agree certainly on that point, but is also politically weaker and weaker because there is no more nostalgia for the empire in Russia now. No.
I think they liked taking
It's fading.
Crimea.
No. It was 6 or 7 years ago. It was 6 or 7 years ago. The situation is quite different. And in any case, Crimea is quite different in Russian mind than Ukraine. Because, Crimea was the Côte d'Azur for the Russian people. Kiev is completely different.
Kiev, the original capital.
I know, the cradle of Russia and so on.
And the mad nationalist manifesto for the...
The mad nationalists, not the entire country.
Yeah, but the president wrote a manifesto of,
I know.
of dismembering or subjugating Ukraine, and he seems to believe in this. And he has been telling us very frankly and very publicly that he thinks Ukraine shouldn't exist. And so
I read the text. I know it. But I keep telling you that he's weaker and weaker.
all right, let's finish with this. Let's say he invades. I mean,
It's possible.
all the signals are there, and it can go either way, and only he knows whether he will or not, and maybe even he doesn't yet know.
He doesn't.
Right. But let's say that he doesn't. And let's say that his 140,000 troops, it's not quite enough to occupy all of Ukraine, but say he takes a land bridge to Crimea, say he does a seaborne assault on Odessa, and takes the rest of Donbass, say. What would the French public's reaction be to that?
Shock.
Will it be, that's just Easterners having their squabbles? Or would it be, wow, this Putin is a dangerous madman, we need to rearm, and we are going to spend real money on it, and we need to create a serious European defense?
The last point. The reaction would be definitely we need a political union and a common European defense. Certainly yes. And there would be a shock if Putin invaded or annexed new parts of Ukraine. Certainly yes. Definitely yes.
Because then we are back in the 1930s, aren't we?
I don't like those comparisons, but in a very dangerous situation. Certainly.
I mean, we fought 2 world wars to agree that changing borders by force in Europe is
not
verboten.
Absolutely.
That if you have a problem with national minorities, you apply the Convention of the Council of Europe
Certainly,
on national
yes.
minorities.
Certainly, yes. And the annexation of Crimea was the first annexation in Europe after the Second World War.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen. Let's hope you have a successful presidency. And let's hope President Macron wins his presidential election and a second term.
He will.
Because I think he's a good European. He has a strategic mind. And we need him to persuade the new German government.
I will tell him.
that Europe, which is the largest area of economic and political freedoms in the world, should not be at the mercy of others. That we need Europe, in the words of Tony Blair, not a superstate, but a superpower.
Absolutely.
We
I agree
on
with you and Blair.
Great.
Thank
you very much for your time.
Thank you to you.
Thanks. Goodbye. This was the English language section of Free Radio Europe. If you liked what you heard, please pass on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media. Thank you for your attention. See you next time.